When you think of a DJ scratching, who do you think of? Grandmaster Flash? Jazzy Jeff? For me, it's always been this guy, DJ Psy, and in the hardcore scene he was hailed as the #1 scratch master. But there's so much more to this man than just finger control that all the men dream of, and in this video I'm going to show you what I've learned about Psy this month. Hi, I'm Stuart and this is Hardcore History. Every month I take a look at the careers of one of the artists of our happy hardcore pasts. Those who made our nights out memorable and gave me the soundtrack of my early driving years. If you're new here or you haven't yet pressed that subscribe button but feel like it today, please be my guest and hit it. And if you enjoyed the video, I have no objections with you giving it a thumbs up either. I'm a bit of a geek, but you'll get used to that. Let's get into it. This month we're taking a look at Simon Cranny, a pretty laid-back guy originally from Croydon who was born in 1968. The scratch master who loves Thai food is someone we've known as DJ Psy since the late 80s. Not only that, he's the first artist to email me back before a video goes out, which I appreciated massively, so thank you Psy if you are watching. He gave me the opportunity to ask if any high points were particularly memorable for him, and he gave me one of the most humble answers I could have asked for. More on that soon, but first we need to head back to the 80s. Early on in his life, Psy was massively into ska music, from bands such as The Specials, but it was in 1983 that the course of his musical life was changed forever when he discovered hip-hop thanks to Kent-based Invicta Radio and the Mastermind Roadshow hosted by Max LX and Dave VJ. Hidden in amongst all the cheesy pop music elsewhere on the radio dial, Psy was instantly hooked to this groundbreaking underground music, and he would tune in every night that Mastermind aired to listen instead of doing his homework. Inspired by his newfound love for hip-hop, Psy worked Monday and Thursday evenings, Saturdays and during every school holiday at Halfords to be able to afford to buy records and, most importantly, to be able to afford a pair of Technics turntables. Priced at £250 each, they were expensive, but for mixing and scratching they were an absolute must-have. Simon was also a drummer and converted his loft in Croydon into a music studio. From there, he taught himself to scratch over hip-hop records, something I'm sure was difficult with the lack of internet or YouTube how-to videos. After finishing college, Psy studied geography at Nottingham University, where he got together with a few like-minded individuals who also loved the same music. They formed a club called Urban Groove and put on a night for the other students, which proved very popular. Seeing the talent Psy had, one of his mates managed to arrange a tester gig for him at a wine bar called Venue 53 in Nottingham city centre after bigging him up to the wine bar owner. The first night went pretty well, and within 2 weeks Psy was consistently packing out the place every Friday night. The owner of the wine bar then bought a nightclub named Eden and asked Psy if he would play there, which of course he jumped at the opportunity. Taking inspiration mostly from the pirate radio stations that Psy would listen to religiously while back in Croydon during the uni holidays, he would play a lot of house music as it started to become massively popular. This was around the end of the Summer of Love and the acid house phenomenon when UK producers were really starting to come into the limelight. The night quickly became very popular and the owner moved to a better and bigger venue. The now legendary club Venus, where Psy was resident through 1990 when the rave scene really started to gain momentum. What was Psy's high point, I hear you ask? The aspect of his career that the man himself looks back on with the fondest memories is being blessed with that initial opportunity to DJ professionally in Nottingham. After many years as just a frustrated bedroom DJ throughout the 80s, he's proud to have been part of such an influential movement just as it was really evolving, driven by ideas and music that hadn't been done or heard before. Despite the huge popularity of these Saturday nights at Venus, the manager wanted his night to follow the trendier London Balearic style of the time. Psy couldn't relate to that type of sound or scene, so instead stuck to his guns and played the harder, edgier, underground rave stuff, which was received very well with people from all over the Midlands queuing around the block to get in. As the clientele became more and more rave orientated, the manager who didn't want to be associated with that type of people or their partying ways, sacked Si. Without a regular club night, Si got stuck right into helping to build the Nottingham rave scene, regularly appearing on the city's main pirate radio station, Rave FM, alongside friends DJ Mayhem and DJ D2. He also appeared regularly at the Marcus Garvey Centre for promoters such as the infamous DIY crew. It wasn't long afterwards that fellow Midland-based DJ SS booked Si for one of his Nemesis events in Leicester, where he played to over 3,000 people. This led to Si playing at Amnesia in Coventry, before being booked to play for Dreamscape, Helter Skelter, Obsession, Perception, Resurrection and Fantasia, which brought him huge exposure around the UK. Si believes that one of the biggest factors in getting his name out there in the 91-92 period was Gideon from Fantasia and Obsession, specifically coming to watch him play at Milwaukee's near Bedford, a place I last read anything about when we did the Dougal and Gamma video. People dubbed him the #1 scratch master in the UK, a moniker he emphatically disputes, but is nonetheless humbled by and appreciates. To be the best, you have to practice a lot, and Si would spend a lot of his time doing this, planning new routines and trying to learn new patterns. With no media such as YouTube to be inspired by, and virtually zero DJs on pirate radio stations who'd scratch mix, it really was a case of inventing patterns himself. He would use his scratches to augment the music, livening up flatter parts of the track and injecting some rhythm and interest into them. It only frustrated him when he would turn up to clubs to find that the decks were set too far apart or the mixer was some strange thing with no crossfader. Regularly, he would have practiced for days on a routine, but then wouldn't have a decent enough setup to perform it on. Disheartened by this happening more regularly to him, he lost faith and practiced less. We would see Si at multiple gigs every weekend, and he's spoken about times when he would, for example, drive from Croydon to DJ in Newcastle, then on to Carlisle before heading right down to Exeter for his final gig, then drive back to Croydon. All in one night. It's no wonder he was putting, on average, 75,000 miles on his cars each year in the 90s. By 1994, when the rave scene started to noticeably split into jungle and hardcore, Si was still working a full-time job while playing out every weekend. He realised that he couldn't cope with the demands of both. He was cancelling gigs because he was just too tired to manage the long car journeys to perform. While at an event hosted by Fusion that year, Simon met Chris Sargent, also known as DJ Unknown, and they discussed a collaboration in the studio after Chris had been sending Si productions as part of the duo DJs Unknown with John Skinner, aka Temptation. Si made the decision to leave his day job and concentrate on music full time. He was also left with another choice: to follow the darker sounds of jungle or the pianos and vocals of hardcore. As 1994 progressed, jungle became quite uninspiring for Si, with endless amen break-based tracks and little musicality. His words before all you jungle heads come at me. Si in particular favoured the atmosphere at the events catering for the more uplifting sounds of hardcore, as did some of the other DJs of the time, and within a year, Happy Hardcore was born as more and more events started to cater just for this newly evolving sound. Of course, this was also around the time when the Sanctuary in Milton Keynes was at its peak, attracting around 7,000 punters to the scores of events that ran there during the 90s and 2000s. By the mid-90s, there was also a hugely popular scene based around cities such as Life at Bowlers, Ark in Leeds and the Gallery in Leeds, featuring uplifting ravey house music and the more uplifting breakbeat hardcore tunes. Having made his name in the area previously playing these styles of music at a club in Morley near Leeds called The Orbit, these nights made for a wonderful variation in Si's DJing experiences. His pursuit of the more uplifting side of the hardcore scene by no means meant that he neglected his intense love for the darker side of music. As well as continuing to DJ at many of the more jungle-orientated events like Quest in Wolverhampton, in his productions, Si would often inject a little more seriousness alongside the cheese and pianos to try and balance the flavour of the tracks. With the production team of Temptation, Si and Unknown's first release was Are You Ready and Moments in Time, released in 1994 on Hectic Records, an affiliate of Fusion Events. Si and Unknown also often produced just as a duo, and they formed Quosh Records for their releases, the first official release being Cheddar 1, reworking elements of tracks by Elevator and OT Quartet. The Cheddar series tended to feature, as the name suggests, a cheesier sound, and they were very popular, but under their main moniker Si and Unknown, plus aliases such as The Vampire, the duo released tracks such as Cyclone and Techno Storm, with a much edgier, deeper, more underground sound. Quosh soon became one of the scene's most prolific record labels, with Si and Unknown working with many different artists and guest remixers to bring some of the best happy hardcore to the masses. A year after we saw the first release on Quosh, we saw the birth of its sister label, Terrific Tunes, and the duo's debut on that label, the Rip-Off EP, anchored by a couple of hip-hop samples, something that became their production trademark. They operated out of several different purpose-built studios throughout the years, Si remembering one on an industrial estate in Aldershot most fondly, probably because it was right next to a car workshop so he could get cheap servicing. With the well-documented huge drop in vinyl sales and resultant drop in income from music production, the duo opted to run their production ventures from their respective homes in the later years of their 18-year partnership. Just wanted to give you a break from all the information overload and let you know I'm back behind the decks again. Over on my Mixcloud page now is this month's DJ Si inspired mix, featuring all your favourite tracks. Well, the ones that I've got in my collection anyway. Pre-warning though, I can't scratch. I've tried so many times. You're going to want to check that after the video, so I'll put a little link in the description for you. Hang in there with me. DJ Si is about to go digital. As we've seen with other artists that we've featured, the duo also ventured into other musical genres. The most successful of these ventures were their productions in the UK garage scene, under the alias Trick or Treat, with an appearance on Top of the Pops for their remix of Baby D's Let Me Be Your Fantasy. Si remembers with humour the amount of flack he got from their foray into UK garage from some hardcore fans, but he's totally unabashed about it and explained that around that time he firmly believed UK garage was way more hardcore than hardcore was. It may not surprise you to hear that he especially loved the really underground tunes, with their tough, funky, skippy beats and bass lines. It reminded him of the glorious birth period of breakbeat hardcore around the early 90s. UK garage wasn't the only other genre that Si dabbled in. Through the label Frisky Records, he was able to represent his love of bouncy house and particularly cherishes the productions with the Trickster, aka Vinyl Trickster. There was also an infamous and very cheeky bootleg Donk and Scouts house label that Si may or may not have had something to do with. I couldn't confirm. Something that did catch my eye while doing research is that he was also massively into breakbeat. I'm sure this would have been established in his early rave days, and he continued it into the 2000s and beyond. An example I found of this was with the Freestylers, where Si co-produced 2 tracks on their New School Breaks album, Raw as F*** in 2004. Both the title track and my favourite track from the album, Warrior Charge, has Si credited. The track's also credited Chris, but this video isn't about him, that's maybe one for another time. By the mid-2000s, Si was one of the most in-demand DJs in the scene. He was pitted against Darren Styles in Uproar's The Hardcore Showdown and played at pretty much every event of the time. Honestly, it would be easier for me to name the promoters that he didn't play for. Over the years, he has won many awards, including the much-deserved Outstanding Contribution to Hardcore in the 2003 Hardcore Heaven Awards and the Best DJ Award in 2005. Invigorated by influences from both trance and hard house, after a real lack of inspiration and below-par releases as a result, in the late 90s there was a fantastic renaissance of hardcore music, with Psy favouring the raw, bouncy, underground style championed by himself, Scott Brown and a few others. Psy and Unknown really upped their game production-wise as the decade progressed, resulting in a much meatier and ear-pleasing overall sound. They teamed up with a couple of songwriters and employed professional vocalists to perform on their tracks. As a result, their productions were totally original and proved very popular. This was all around the time when in Birmingham had become a mecca for hardcore, with its Hardcore Till I Die and Raver Baby events, and concurrently the very successful Clubland Extreme Hardcore series of compilation album releases. So, hardcore events were busy up and down the country, and there was an outlet providing a decent return for investing a lot of time, effort and money into expensive productions. What more could you ask for as a hardcore artist? While everything seemed to be on the up, the one thing declining was vinyl sales, as we all started to move towards a digital world with everything at our fingertips. At the time, the internet wasn't as polished as it is today, and artists were getting the rough end of the stick as everyone worked out how to benefit properly from streaming and digital music stores. Income from record sales have been a massive part of Psy's earning through the 90s and 2000s, and although being one of the scene's first major players to try and embrace this new way of distributing and selling music, in an underground genre such as hardcore, the financial differences in return compared to vinyl sales was huge. Much more crucially for Psy though, the Clubland influence had necessarily also meant the music being produced was becoming more and more commercial. The scene was becoming the total opposite of what had attracted him to it in the first place, and he was finding it musically unsatisfying both as a DJ and producer, and from the direction the scene was being led, he could sense hardcore was no longer where his skills lay. By 2010, and thanks to the multiple contacts he had obtained, Simon began to develop property in the southwest. Maybe it was finally time to utilise that university education. Despite his growing concerns around the decline of hardcore, Psy stuck at it, working with some newer faces and gaining new friends in the scene such as Joey Riot and Technicore. He also collaborated with Mike Descaler, aka Recon, producing an often still requested track, Meat Feast. And in 2010, a collaboration was born between Psy and Unknown's Quosh and Twister, a label created by Recon and the late Squaddy. Through this collaboration, the label Quosh vs Twister was created and went on to have 4 releases between 2010 and 2012. This wasn't the only joint venture between the Quosh camp and another from the scene. In 2011, the label teamed up with Al Storm's 24/7 Hardcore, bringing us Quosh vs 24/7. That collaboration generated one of Psy's most favourite ever hardcore productions, Do You Love Your Hardcore? With the scene in decline and heading in a direction Psy hated, personal and professional differences and no small degree of controversy led him to step back from the scene in 2013. He ditched music production in favour of full-time property development, but remained DJing all over the country and abroad regularly ever since. Most often booked for classic hardcore sets and usually playing tunes from around that golden 2003 to 2009 period, Psy's still keen to play newer productions, and sometimes does, and although many fans pester him about returning to music production, he passionately explains that he believes a music scene based on youth counterculture should be led by new, younger talent rather than old men. Because DJing is no longer his source of income, he DJs now more for enjoyment and has been really enjoying his sets these last years. I think this shows. From the many comments I've read online about Psy, one thing seems to remain true. Whether you saw him in the 90s or 2000s, or you've been to see one of his more recent sets, you're guaranteed to see a legend in action with his big cheesy grin, and you're guaranteed to have a great night thanks to Si. There's so many random facts that I find out while researching that I had to share a couple with you. Si's a bit of a fast car enthusiast and has owned 4 Ford Sierra Sapphire Cosworths, 2 of which he wrote off, one of which ended up ablaze on the M4 motorway on his return from a gig in Wales. He is also a fisherman and has recently rediscovered his love for the pastime with some old school pals after not really being able to pursue it for so long with the nature of his work. It's believed that he entered the DMC World DJ Championships while he was in Nottingham, a competition we've mentioned a few times recently. However, it also seems he did not win. Si himself has spoken before about being hailed the UK's #1 scratch master, saying that while he appreciates the sentiment, he doesn't believe this to be the case, with so many great hip-hop turntablists having come from the UK. Whether you believe it or not, Si, you're my #1 scratcher from the hardcore scene, and a producer and DJ that has provided top-tier entertainment and music for over 30 years. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate every single one of you. I really enjoyed not only looking into the career of Si this month, but also chatting with the man himself. A very interesting man with a phenomenal story, and as you will have seen over the past 20 minutes or so, a guy who's much more than just a happy hardcore scene's #1 scratch master. Made a promise to give someone a shout out this month, and it's none other than Mr. Sharky. I'm in absolute awe of your knowledge and your nerdy ways. You've been a massive help in the hardcore history journey, and so I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. I'll wait for the message, mate, to let me know which bit sent you into meltdown this month. Hopefully there's a bit more colour in my cheeks. My Si-inspired hardcore history DJ mix is live right now over on my Mixcloud page. Mixcloud.com/Stuart-K music will take you around about there, and I'll leave a link in the description to take you directly there. If you want to chat with me about Si or anything else, I'll be hanging around the comments section, or if you want a direct line, you can grab me on Facebook or Instagram, and I'll put some links for those below too. Let's have a chat about next month. I'm about at the point where I have a schedule for the year, but I need your help filling in the name for next month. A lot of you have been asking me to look at one of the MCs from our scene, so I decided it was about time I delivered on that. We've had some great suggestions so far, but now it's your chance to decide who we actually look at next month. Don't have long to do it, as I will need some time to research and stuff. You have until Monday the 6th of March to get your vote into the comments section, and I'll add them all up on the Tuesday morning and let you know on Facebook and Insta who we're getting into. Finally, I know I've been talking for ages. If you like what we're doing on the channel, I'd love it if you slap the subscribe button, and if you enjoy the video, that like button ain't too far from it either. I'm gonna give your ears a break now. I need a brew and to get prepared for next month. I'll see you then.